Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to this Evergreen, Indiana Training Tuesday. Today, you'll be introduced to the booking module. This is a feature that has been completely refreshed and expanded with new functionality for version 3.4 of the Evergreen ILS. That is the version that we will be upgrading to in November. My name is Ruth Frasur. This is the part of the webinar where I usually say that I'm the training coordinator for the Evergreen Indiana Library Consortium. While that is true, my official title is Evergreen Support and Development Administrator. It is in the full context of that role that I will be presenting to you today, both as a teacher for Evergreen, Indiana, and a part of the Evergreen development community. Now, let's get started. So, what is the Evergreen booking module? This is actually not a new feature completely, but it is something that you may have heard of in the past. And then we actually turned it off in Evergreen because the functionality and the ease of work was just not there yet. So now that it has been rebuilt, we're bringing it back so that hopefully you can utilize it in your libraries. The booking module is a generic reservation system that comes standard in the Evergreen ILS software package. Very verbosely put, it is a generic reservation system that's native to and integrated into the Evergreen ILS. The booking module allows you to define and describe non-bibliographic resources in such a way that they can be reserved by library users. One of the things to keep in mind here, and we'll talk about it before, is that we already have a whole catalog of bibliographic resources, and those can be used in the booking module as well. You can utilize those and have reservations made on those separate from the circulation part of Evergreen. But what we're talking about mostly today is going to be the non-bibliographic resources because those don't exist in the catalog. The booking module provides easy to use interfaces for a highly flexible and customizable reservation management system that's relevant to your local library system. This is probably the most important thing because we know that each of your libraries is significantly different from your neighbors and others, either in Evergreen or wherever. Each library is individual. And there are going to be different ways, if you choose to use this, that you choose to use it. And we'll talk a little bit more about how you can customize this and how flexible it can be for you. And then the booking module also gathers reportable data about different types of library use. And we know that this is very important as we tell the story of what your library does in terms of community engagement, patron service, and a variety of other things. So we're talking about a reservation system. What types of things can be reserved? I already mentioned that we already have a catalog of bibliographic resources that can be made bookable so that special reservations can be made for them. But what are some other things? And before I go further with this, I'd like you to add things to the chat window that maybe you would think about using with the booking module. What are some things that you would like to make reservable for your library users? And I'll just give you a couple seconds to add those things in there. So Britta has added LCD projector. I'm going to carry on with this. As you add those things, please feel free, not just feel free, I encourage you to take inspiration from one another as well. The booking module can be used to allow reservations for meeting rooms, equipment like a projector, or even people. It really is up to you. So this is something that if you have a book a librarian program or have considered that, You could use this for tech appointments. You could use it, again, to have people reserve equipment. You could use this as a way to make the reservations for your meeting rooms. And one of the nice things about this is that the reservations, whereas most of the time the things that we're checking out in our libraries, they're for days or weeks or things like that, is that here you're scheduling appointments which can be for days or weeks, but they can also be for hours or partial hours. So it really is completely driven by what your library needs. So we're going to look at some of the interfaces so that you can see what's available when you begin to use this tool. This is not an in-depth how-to, but it is meant to introduce you to the digital environment you'll be working in. As I said before, the Evergreen booking module has been completely rebuilt so that nearly every interface has added functionality and ease of use. There are a couple that still rely on the old interface, but it's usually to just check in a barcode or something like that. So the first thing that has been rebuilt is the administration page. You're going to access the booking and administration page from the administration menu in the top navigation bar of the web client. On the booking administration page, you'll see the 5 steps to setting up your system. These are in alphabetical order rather than workflow order. So the first thing that you're going to do when you're setting up your reservation system is you're going to define your resource types. Again, it is unfortunate, at least from my perspective, that they're laid out this way, but I will be sending along in your follow-up email a document that actually goes through the workflow of this setup and points out what you do first. So you're going to start by defining your resource types, and then you can start adding your resources. After you've added resources, you can then go in and you can also add resource attributes and resource attribute values. I've changed the color here because the first 2 steps are required steps. You have to have resource types first, and then of course, in order to put reservations on resources, you have to have resources to reserve. But you don't necessarily need to have resource attributes or resource attribute values to make these reservations. It really is going to be determined by what that resource is and how you want it to actually be reserved and how you also find it. So those are optional, but definitely recommended. And then the last thing is going to be the resource attribute maps, so that once you have established resource attributes as well as values for them, then you can map those attributes and values to the actual resources. We do go more in depth in the actual workflow document and the documentation that is available as well, which we'll cover in a few minutes. After the administration and the setup of your system, the next is actually using it. And that is going to be done through I call it the workflows menu, but through the booking menu. In the booking menu, you'll find all of the staff interfaces for daily workflows. You can find out more about how how to use each of these using the how-to manual and other documentation. Today, we'll look briefly at 2 of the redesigned interfaces. In the Create Reservation interface, where we are right now, there are multiple ways that you can find resources to reserve, including selecting by type. using a barcode number, and limiting by attributes. You may not have attributes, in which case there would not be a way to limit by attributes. But the more things that you add to this resource as far as describing it and things, the easier it's going to be to find those things, where I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment as well. Another one of the redesigned interfaces within the booking menu is the Manage Reservations. In this interface, you're able to filter through the existing reservations, select them, select one that you're looking at, and then either right-click for an actions menu or select an action from the actions menu above the grid. And I'd like to actually get into that real quickly. So let's see if I can give you a sneak peek of, so we'll get logged in. So this is what the upgraded Evergreen ILS is going to look like when it is made available to you in November. And you'll see now that we do have the booking menu up here at the top, and we have then the workflow interfaces in here. And I do want to, I'm going to click here through real quickly. This is the one that we already saw, the create reservations. You can see if I click on these different tabs, if there's a barcode I wanted to look up, I could enter it in here. Once there are actually resource types established, which there have not been any established for the consortial collection, you can see this is my owning library. If this is determined by your workstation setup. So if I had a workstation that was set up for Adams County Decatur branch, that would actually already automatically populate there, and then I would have a list of any resource types that were available, and I could choose from that. You can see that we have the option for multiple day reservations or single day, and that if we select multiple day, then we have the option to actually, oh, I guess maybe we can't go. Yeah, sure we can. You just have to be careful how you actually scroll through there. I was a little sloppy with that, and we can make this reservation for a duration of days as opposed to in here. And I was wondering if it would add the time here, but so then the other thing that we do have the option is to, in this screen in the create reservation, that you can also adjust how long your reservations last, or how long that day actually is, and then you can adjust your granularity as well. Here it's set for 30 minutes, and you have an option for 30, 15, 30, or 60. We're not going to talk much about the pull list, but this is where you would go to, similar to the holds pull list. This is where you would see the list of things that had been reserved and need to be made available for pickup, which that's a conceptual idea as opposed to, I mean, you're not going to be picking up a room, but it needs to be, okay, this room is available for you to use it. We call it pickup, even though it's not. This is something that can be defined by the number of days. You may do it one day at a time, or you may do it 3 days, however, but it's going to give you those things that need to be pulled in the next. So this would be things that need to be pulled by tomorrow, or things that need to be pulled by 5 days from now. And this, so you can narrow that down if you want. I'm going to skip through that. Capture resources. This is one of those interfaces that has not been changed, and I did want to show you that it is going to look different. And this is something that is actually being fixed right now. This is still a development server. I don't know if you are recognizing what I just broke there, but I'm going to unbreak it real quick. And then booking pickup, that's where somebody is going to actually claim that thing that they've reserved. When they have finished with it, they will return it or end their reservation. You can either use their card, or if it is something that has a barcode, you can do it by that. One thing to keep in mind for the booking module is that if you're using it to create reservations, all of the transactions need to go through that module. So that while this does look like a check-in, and it is conceptually, it still needs to be handled as a booking return. Don't check in a resource in the check-in screen that is being managed by the booking module. In the same way, don't actually use the checkout screen to get that resource to a patron. And then I want to take a look at the manage screens. Now, I don't have a reservation here, but I do want to show you what the action menu looks like so that you have the option to edit a reservation from this management screen, cancel. You can actually pick up, return, all of those things, and then you also have some view options. I am of a mind, and you can actually create from this screen. This is the most important screen of the booking module. And the reason that I say that is you can essentially forego everything else that is in this menu by simply going to the Manage Reservations screen, and you can actually do all the work there with the exception of the pull list. Again, this is highly flexible, highly customizable, and your workflows in your library are going to dictate how you use it. But if I was in a library setting this up, I would, either for myself or for any staff that I was managing or working with, I would say, we have our pull list, and then we have our managed reservations, and this is where we're going to do the vast majority of our work. This is really the money screen. There are filters available to look at various reservations. What's going to happen, and you can't really see it here, is that whatever your workstation is set up, it's going to populate this reservation location, and then depending, in this case, Descendants is already selected. You could also select Ancestors, and that's going to be everything above the your org unit that you're talking about. So in this case, the consortial collection, an ancestor would actually be Evergreen Indiana Consortium. If you were talking about going back to Adams County, Decatur, that branch is going, there are no descendants of that, but then the ancestor would be Adams County, the system, and then Evergreen, Indiana, the consortium. So those of you who have multi-branch systems, this ancestor and descendant hierarchy is something that may play a part in how you're looking at these reservations. I'm going to go back in just a second to one of the administration interfaces to show you why that comes into play. But let's go ahead and get back to here. Are there any questions at this point? I know that this is really a lot to take in. If not, I'll keep going, and then we'll have time in a few minutes to get into some of the more nitty-gritty of it all. And then finally, I talked about the reporting, and I get back here real quickly. Finally, you have the ability to create reports related to reservations and the resources that you're using in that system. When creating a report template, if you scroll down into the non-core sources, you will find a group of 7 sources that you can choose from to select your data points to build your report. While there are no pre-made report templates in the shared admin folder yet, I fully anticipate new ones being added in the next few months. And you can see here we have an example. I selected resource from the non-core sources, and then you can see some of the attributes that are available there. We can take a look into the interface in just a second if somebody would like. So we've looked at the interfaces, and now the next thing, I mean, this is a pretty feature-rich module, but it's also fairly simple. The question then becomes, how do you get started? I am always of a mind that when you are starting something new, you need to make a plan. And that plan generally starts with an inventory of what you have to work with. So one of the things that you have to work with is the booking module. That's the tool that you can use for this reservation system. But then you also have, what are the resources that you actually want to make reservable? And who are the staff that are going to manage this? How do you do training? So there's a question here from Michelle Owens. If you were going to allow the public to reserve a meeting room, is there a way to use settings to block out certain times that the library already has programmed in that space? Michelle, at this point, what would be done is that the library would also function as a patron and would reserve those spaces. So that if there is a program, then the library staff would reserve that room, just like a patron would. So that it's not only a public versus staff, it is a full reservation system. And this is somewhat like if any of you have used Evanced Spaces, where it doesn't really matter who you are, whether you're an internal person or group or an external person or group, the space still needs to be reserved. I will say at this point too, I've had a conversation with a colleague who talked about calendar integration. There is not calendar integration yet, but I do think that it is something that is possible and possibly desirable as well, and may become a development project down the road if enough people express interest in such a thing. So question from Angie, does a patron have to have a barcode to reserve a room? Are you saying, do they need to have a patron account, or does there need to be a barcode associated with the room? Not necessarily. That, again, that's something that is a local definition. You could conceivably have a guest room account, so that you had a patron account set up for just those room reservations. Again, this is one of those things, and this goes back to this idea of making a plan. And I will say too that if there is something, well, I'm going to say 2 things. First of all, there will be more in-depth training on how to actually use these interfaces, how to actually get them set up. I'm still trying to think about what that looks like, whether it becomes an asynchronous course that you can use alongside as you're setting up something, or if we do it as a workshop where people actually bring a resource. And when I say bring, I'm talking about a virtual class, but this resource that they want to set up in there, and then we can actually talk about what would be the mechanisms for doing that. But if in the meantime this becomes something that you want to do and you are feeling stuck, this is one of those things I think it works best to talk it out. So feel free to contact me or whoever you feel comfortable contacting. But I think that this is a good kind of roundtable workshop thing that we will talk more about in the future when we get into those details. So we're going to make a plan, and I will have some preliminary documentation to help you think about this and maybe get some ideas written down. I am of an age where I still write a lot of things on paper. The other thing that I highly encourage you is to start small. Do not necessarily expect yourself or your library to find everything in it that could potentially be used as a reservable thing and want to get it all done by the end of the year. Pick one. And I think Britta's example of the LCD projector would be a great place to start. Pick that thing and get it set up and make it reservable, and see how those workflows work with your patrons, what it is working, what is not working, because not everything is going to work seamlessly. Even if you have everything set up beautifully in the system, there are going to be likely things that you didn't think about, or things that a patron really surprised you and came with that one thing that you didn't think about. So start small. Another question here from Michelle. If a patron wants to reserve a piece of equipment for a certain date, and that equipment is currently on hold for another patron, will they receive some type of notice that the item is not currently available? It will just not have that available date there for them. And that's one thing that I have not actually looked into completely. And thank you, Michelle, for bringing this up. I have not looked into the integration in my account for patrons to do this completely remotely. At this point, the booking module is something that is mostly staff mediated, so that they would need to contact you and say that they would like to book this, and then the notification would be you articulating, saying that that date is not available. But I am going to look into my account and see if there is an integration there. I've looked at this multiple times, including when it went into the software and was made available, and we'd never discussed that. So interesting question, and I think that if it is not there, that is something that we would definitely want to pursue in the future to have added. We have a question from Sarah. If we were going to add an LCD projector, for example, and they didn't return it on time, would there be overdue fines? Yes. So that let me get through this getting started part, and then we're going to go back and we're going to look at resource real quickly, and we'll add some stuff there. Sarah, I definitely want to get back, and we'll look at that in just a second. Start small and then build a solid foundation. And these things, making a plan and starting small, those are going to be your solid foundation there. So let's get back into here. We're going to go into the booking administration, and I'm going to go ahead and add a new resource type. And so when you are adding a resource type, and one thing I'll point out here, the catalog item, you'll see this is grayed out. This is a feature that's actually not available yet. This would be a way to actually start a stub record to have a non-bibliographic resource added to the bibliographic database, but we don't need to worry about that right now. And so we have then the options to add the fine amount, and these just go in as decimal or whole numbers. You don't have to add any punctuation unless you're doing decimal, but you don't need to add dollar signs. It won't actually. I'm actually trying to add a dollar sign and it won't let you. So they just go in as whole or decimal numbers. And then you can determine how often this is assessed. So this could be 1 hour. So if somebody is borrowing a recording kit, a sound recording kit, and they do it on an hourly basis, they could be fined for the hour. It could be a day. It could even be 15 minutes. So, and that's actually how you would type it in there, with a whole number, a space, and then a time designation. This interbooking and intercirculation interval, this is how much time is there between reservations. So if you are, we'll go back to the LCD projector example. If there's a time from when that is returned that you need to go through it and make sure everything is actually in the case, and in the time of COVID, everything has been sanitized properly, then you could add an amount of time in there, again, with a whole number and then a time designation. That was probably a little extreme, 15 minutes, or it could be 30 days, or it could be whatever, a whole number and then the time designation for that interbooking and intercirculation interval. Then this is also where you set a max fine amount. This should be auto-populated, but it may not be. And I'm going to have to do some testing on that. But if it's not, you just select your home library for that reservation, and then you're going to name the type. Remember, this is a resource type, and so you can do that. Now, if you check this transferable box, generally is going to apply to multi-branch systems, and it's going to allow that resource to be moved from one location to another. You're not going to be moving rooms from one location to another. You're probably not going to be moving people from one location to another. So that's what that does. And there's documentation about that, which we'll look at in just a second. And so that is available. So then let's go back to, so we have our resources types, and then I'd like to, this is the thing that I wanted to show you real quickly. I'm going to go back and add a resource type in a second. If you have not set up any resource types, you will not be able to set up any resources. So this comes back empty. I'm going to go back again. And this is also a thing that I am not a huge fan of. I don't think that you should have to click these many things, but that's me. I'm going to actually add a, you do not have to add a fine amount. You do not have to have a fine interval. I am going to put in 30 minutes for whatever reason. I don't know. And I am going to call this meeting room. So this is actually something that I also wanted to check here. This reminds me of something that I actually needed to follow up with yep. Okay, so this will work, but it is not working yet, and I'm not going to pop out to another server to make sure that it works, but I am going to leave that up so I don't forget to follow up with it. Okay, so I have been mentioning documentation. Documentation being manuals and a variety of other things that you can use to help make your way through that. One of the places that has really extensive documentation right now is Sitka, which is part of the British Columbia Library Co-op. And I have a link here. I'll show you what this looks like. It is not particularly pretty at all. But it is going to walk you through these things step by step. Except when we are talking about setting things up, we're actually going to start at the administration first. And you can see, there are screenshots here that these are generally exactly what you would see in Evergreen, Indiana. There may be some Sitka branding on there, and then you can walk through and it's going to show you a variety of other things. They do have some videos as well. So this is available. I'm a big fan of Sitka's documentation. They have a very hardworking group of people who are constantly writing directions on how to use things. The other thing that I have on here is the official Evergreen ILS documentation. And then we will have our own Evergreen, Indiana documentation, which I am working on. Not as we speak, but once I get off here, I'll be working on a little bit more on it. Excuse me real quickly. I needed to cough, but not in the microphone. Okay, so what other questions do you have? If you have other questions or comments or things you just want to share out into the ether about this. Angie made a comment, this is really cool. There are so many possibilities. That is very true. There are really endless possibilities, and there are a lot of nuances in here. Oh, there was one thing I did want to show you. I'm going to bring this back over here. Yes, Pamela asked if there will be a recording available. Absolutely. So in the follow-up email that you receive, there will be a link to the recording. There will also be links to this documentation, as well as a document that's specific to Evergreen, Indiana, on how that will be similar to Sitka's documentation, but will be customized for us. And then feedback survey and probably some other stuff. I always think of the follow-up email as kind of like a gift bag of stuff, so I just kind of keep throwing stuff into it. So Susan says, we are thinking of starting a library of things. Would this be a good place to reserve and track these things? It depends, Susan. So it can be. I generally think of the booking module as an extension of your traditional circulation module or practices or whatever. Most things that are going into the library of things are traditionally cataloged. And so while they're not monographic things, and we don't really think of them as bibliographic things, they are. And so there may be a crock pot that has a catalog record, and it goes through the traditional circulation route. But maybe you have a kitchen demo cart that is not something that somebody's going to necessarily take out of the building, but they want to reserve it. Or maybe they do take it out of the building, and then maybe that is something that gets scheduled. Or a PA system. It really is up to your library to decide, do the circulation modifiers that are available and the way that you find, the way that you describe and then find and then circulate items, does it already work? Is there something that's already in there that works for what you're doing? If not, then this may be the way to go with that. You don't really check out rooms, although there have been workarounds done. And so this may make checking out rooms a little bit more fully featured and work better. You don't really check out reference librarians, but you could. But are you going, I mean, is there going to be a barcode associated with John Doe MLS that you check out to a person and they circulate them for 4 hours? This kind of alleviates those many workarounds that we librarians are really notorious for. We can make do with a spreadsheet. It would be super, super annoying and would take forever to find the things, but we can make do. But what this is meant to do is alleviate all of that duct tape and baling wire. Well, some of the duct tape and baling wire that we rely on a daily basis to get the things done. It may work for you, and that goes back to making the plan. Tools do you have? What resources do you have? This is just another tool. It may help, it may not. This is like a lot of things in Evergreen. I am a big fan of this mentality. I love the open source mentality, but I recognize that not everybody else does or feels comfortable in it. There is a lot of freedom and a lot of opportunity for you to build what you want. There are tools that are there. There are even some pre-cut holes and things. But not everybody likes IKEA furniture. Some people like to go to a furniture store and buy a dresser that's already made and have it delivered, and that they're both completely legitimate. I am a lover of IKEA furniture just as I am as a lover of build your own experience. This is part of the build your own experience toolkit that Evergreen provides. Sarah asks a very good question. Is there an elevated staff permission level needed to add resources like a Cat 1 or Cat 2? It is not another permission level so much as it is there are a couple more permissions, and there will be some discussion at committee level to what profiles they are applied, or if they are not applied to permission levels and then they're just something that is locally applied through the staff permission editor to existing staff accounts. But there are some additional permissions, not very many though. I think it's like 2 or 3. One is for adding those, doing the administrative work, and then the others are, I think they may even be native to circulation permissions. Anything else? Anything else you'd like to see? If not, I'm going to see if I can't very quickly get to this because I do want to show you what it looks like. So this is a test server that is hosted by Mobius in Missouri. Let's see if I can get all of this set up pretty quickly. I think I actually want to. It is without fail that I say, oh, I'd like to do something quickly, and then never ever happens so quickly as I say. Okay, so take a look in here, booking administration. You can see this is a generic version of Evergreen. This is also a version up from what we will be going to, but booking module will look the same. So I'm again going to skip those fines. I was a big proponent of fine free and still am, so I'm going to keep it going on here. Now, I will say too that there are certain things that I'm also a big fan of fines for. If you are loaning somebody a $1,500 piece of equipment, it is really appropriate in my mind to have some level of either fine or deposit on that. This does not actually here allow for deposits, but we're going to look real quickly, and you can see now that I have a type that has been defined. So let's go to then resources. I want to add a new resource. Now that I have a resource type, I can create this. And so one thing to keep in mind with these barcodes is that what you're actually doing when you assign a barcode is you are assigning a unique ID to a thing. Now, the system is also going to be adding a unique ID, but this is the one that you know about. So in this case, rather than putting a number in here, I'm going to put in meeting room 1. This is where you then could, if you wanted to, define a deposit. You have a meeting room. I'm going to put in here $25. I don't need to, if it's a whole number, I don't need to use a decimal point. And then I'm going to here select meeting room. Now you can see down here I set up another resource type. In this installation of the booking module, there were actually already some resource types that had been set up. And then you can also add a user fee. So a user fee is something that they don't get back. A deposit is something that they do get back. So if you just charge a fee, you could have that here. And then this maybe it be a cleaning deposit or something. And then we save that, and you can see now, and I only have this to here. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and define that a little bit more. You can see now here is this resource that I created. You see I have my deposit amount, my user fee, and those type things. So I did, yay, we had time to look at that. Okay, anything else? If not, thanks for being here. I hope that you got some inspiration. Guys, have a great day.